Captain Jiho Park stood tall as he looked through the large window at Nexus 9 station. The space around the station swirled with beautiful colors, deep purples, bright blues, and shimmering gold dust clouds. The station itself was massive, a spinning wheel of metal and light that housed thousands of different alien species. "It's beautiful," whispered his wife, Dr. Hannah Park. She wore her dark hair pulled back in a simple style, her eyes reflecting the starlight. Beside them, their children, Tay and Sue, pressed their small hands against the cold glass of the viewport, their eyes wide with wonder. "Remember what I told you," Jiho said gently to his children. "This is diplomatic territory. We must be respectful of all species we meet." As a decorated Space Fleet intelligence commander with 15 years of service, Jiho understood the delicate balance of interspecies politics better than most humans. "Will we see the floating markets?" asked Tay, bouncing slightly with excitement. At 9 years old, this was his first trip off Earth. "Yes," Hannah smiled, "and the crystal gardens too." The family left their visitor quarters and made their way through the curving hallways of the station. Many aliens nodded respectfully to Jiho in his simple civilian clothes. Even without his uniform, he carried himself with the confidence of a military officer. The marketplace was a riot of smells, sounds, and sights. Floating platforms held exotic fruits from 100 worlds. Merchants called out in the standard trade language. Strange music played from tiny, hovering speakers. "Look there!" Sue pointed to a display where tiny versions of star systems floated in the air, perfect miniature models that spun and glowed just like their real counterparts. Jiho was about to suggest they take a closer look when he noticed 3 tall figures moving purposefully through the crowd. Blue-skinned with elongated limbs, the Vagazians stood nearly 7 feet tall. They wore the black and silver uniforms of station security. "Stay close," Jiho murmured to his family. He wasn't worried. He had all the proper clearances, but something about their direct approach concerned him. The lead Vakazian stopped directly in front of them, looking down with large, double-lidded eyes. "Humans, present identification," he demanded, his voice deep and rumbling. Jiho kept his face neutral as he reached slowly into his pocket. He'd dealt with Vakazians before and knew they were naturally suspicious of quick movements. "I'm Commander Park of Earth Fleet Intelligence," he explained calmly. "We're here on authorized leave. All our papers are in order." The Vakazian took the identification chip and inserted it into a scanner on his wrist. His inner eyelids flickered rapidly, a sign of suspicion in their species. "These credentials appear falsified," he stated flatly. Jiho felt a cold sensation in his stomach. "That's impossible. Those credentials were issued directly by Fleet Command. You match the description of human smugglers operating in this sector," continued the Vakazian. "You will come with us for verification." Hannah stepped forward, keeping her voice level despite her clear concern. "There must be some mistake. My husband is a decorated officer. We're simply on vacation with our children." The Vakazian security team was already moving to surround them. 2 more officers appeared behind them, cutting off any retreat. "Please come with us now," the lead officer insisted. "Resistance will be noted in the report." Jiho quickly assessed their options. They were outnumbered in an unfamiliar location. Any resistance might escalate the situation and put his family at risk. Better to comply and sort out this misunderstanding through proper channels. "We'll come peacefully," Jiho said firmly. He turned to his now frightened children and gave them a reassuring nod. "It's okay. This is just a mix-up with the paperwork. We'll get it sorted out." The family was escorted through the marketplace, now suddenly quiet as dozens of alien species watched the scene unfold. Some whispered to each other, others simply stared. A few looked concerned, but none interfered with station security. Jiho noticed everything as they walked: the layout of the corridors, the location of security cameras, the reactions of bystanders. His military training kept him alert, even as he appeared outwardly calm. This was no random check. Something was wrong. "Where are you taking us?" Hannah asked as they entered a restricted area of the station. "To detention for further questioning," the Vakazian replied coldly. As the doors to the detention block slid open, Jiho caught sight of other detained species, none of them human. His suspicions deepened. This was not standard procedure for a credential verification. "Stay close," he whispered to his family. "And remember, I've been in worse situations than this." What the Vakazians didn't realize was that they hadn't just detained any human family. They had detained one of Earth's most skilled intelligence officers, a man who had escaped 3 hostile planets and survived first contact with the notoriously aggressive Dornian collective. This mistake would soon become very clear to them. The detention chamber was cold and bright. The walls were smooth white metal with no seams. A single bench ran along one wall. The only other furniture was a small table bolted to the floor. Jiho sat on the bench with perfect posture, back straight, hands resting on his knees. He looked calm, as if he were sitting in his own living room rather than a cell. Hana paced back and forth across the small space. "This is ridiculous. They can't just hold us without reason." "They can for 24 hours under station regulations," Jiho replied. His voice was steady. "But it won't come to that." Their children sat close together on the bench. Tay, the older boy, tried to copy his father's calm expression. Sue, their daughter, looked more worried. "Dad, are they going to call Earth?" Sue asked quietly. Her small fingers twisted the edge of her jacket. Jiho turned to her with a gentle smile. "They will," he answered confidently, "and this will be resolved." He didn't tell her that he had activated his emergency beacon when they were first approached. Every high-ranking officer had one implanted. By now, Earth Fleet Command would already know something was wrong. Sue nodded, trusting her father completely. "What's going to happen to the Vakazians when Earth finds out?" Tay asked. "Will there be trouble?" Jiho considered his son's question carefully. "This is politics, Tay. What happens next will depend on many factors." Hana sat down beside her husband. "Someone wanted us detained," she whispered. "This wasn't random." Jiho nodded slightly. He had reached the same conclusion. 3 levels. Above them, in the station's command center, Station Director Krell was facing a crisis. The large Vakazian stood before a wall of screens, showing different parts of the station. His scaled skin was a deep blue-gray, marking him as part of the elite governing class. An aide rushed into the room. "Director, we have an urgent communication. From Earth. Priority 1. Krell's secondary eyelids flickered in surprise. "Earth? Put it through." The main screen flickered and showed the face of a human woman. She wore the formal robes of an Earth ambassador. "Station Director Krell," she began without greeting. Her voice was controlled but firm. "I've received troubling news. You've detained Commander Park, the hero of the Rigel incident." Krell felt his neck scales flatten against his skin in alarm. The Rigel incident was well known throughout the Alliance, a first contact situation that had nearly turned into an interspecies war. It was Commander Park who had prevented bloodshed through quick thinking and diplomatic skill. "Commander Park," Krell repeated. "I have no record of," the ambassador continued. "He's the designer of our current first contact protocols. His family is with him. They were on a sanctioned vacation." Krell quickly accessed the detention logs on a side screen. There it was, a human family detained 3 hours ago in the central marketplace, suspected of smuggling. The identification listed a Jiho Park, but made no mention of his military rank or importance. "This was not authorized by command," Krell said, feeling the situation spiraling out of control. "I will investigate immediately." The ambassador's expression didn't soften. "See that you do. Earth takes the treatment of its citizens very seriously, especially when those citizens are decorated war heroes traveling with their children." The threat behind her words was clear. This could become a serious diplomatic incident. "I will resolve this personally," Krell promised. "There has clearly been a mistake." "Keep me informed of all developments," the ambassador said. "I expect Commander Park and his family to be released and compensated for this error." The screen went dark. Krell turned to his security chief. "Get me everything on this detention, now." As Krell waited for the information, his deputy, a younger Vakazian, named Merez, leaned closer. "Sir," he said quietly, "the traditionalist faction must be behind this. They've been trying to undermine the human alliance for months." Krell considered this. The traditionalists were a powerful political group on their homeworld who believed that Vacasians should limit contact with other species, especially humans. They saw the growing human influence in the Alliance as a threat to their way of life. "If you're right, this is more than a simple mistake," Krell said. "This is sabotage." Merez nodded. "Security Officer Traz, who made the arrest, has family connections to Councillor Vor, and Vor is a known traditionalist leader." Krell's mind raced through the implications. If the traditionalists had orchestrated this incident, they must have known who Commander Park was. They wanted to create tension between Earth and Vacasia. "Send a security team to release the Park family immediately," Krell ordered. "I will meet them personally to apologize." "Sir," Merez warned, "if the traditionalists are watching, they won't be happy if you release the humans so quickly." Krell stood to his full height, towering over his deputy. "I am still in command of this station, and I will not allow political games to threaten our alliance with Earth." In the depths of the station, unaware of the diplomatic storm brewing above them, Jiho Park closed his eyes in meditation. He was already planning 3 steps ahead, ready for whatever might come next. The morning of their second day in detention began with a harsh buzzing sound. Jiho opened his eyes immediately, fully alert. He had slept sitting up against the wall, giving him the best view of both the door and the small vent in the ceiling. During the night, he had counted the footsteps of each guard patrol and timed the security checks precisely. Hannah woke more slowly, stretching her arms above her head. The children were still asleep on the narrow bench, covered with the thin blankets they had been given. "They should have released us by now," Hannah said quietly. Jiho nodded. "Something's blocking the normal channels." He moved to the small sink in the corner and splashed water on his face. "But that tells us something important." "What's that?" Hannah asked, coming to stand beside him. "Someone with real power wants us here." His voice was so low that even Hannah had to strain to hear him. "And they don't want anyone to know about it." During their first day, Jiho had carefully observed everything about the detention facility. He had counted 14 cells, noted the location of every camera, and identified the pattern of the security field that prevented escapes. Most importantly, he had noticed the slight flicker in the lights every 4 hours, a sign that the power grid was switching to a backup system temporarily. As the children woke up, a slot in the door opened and breakfast trays were pushed through. "The same food again," Tay complained, looking at the bland grey nutrition blocks. "Eat it all," Jiho instructed. "We need to keep our strength up." After breakfast, the cell door opened and they were allowed into the common area, a larger room, where detainees from various species could gather for a few hours each day. Jiho had been surprised by this privilege, but now he understood it was part of the station's attempt to appear fair and proper in their treatment of prisoners. In the common area, Hannah approached a thin, green-skinned alien who was nursing a cut on its long arm. Yesterday she had learned this was a Malorian, a plant-based species known for their healing abilities and peaceful nature. "May I help?" Hannah asked, pointing to the wound. As a doctor, she couldn't ignore suffering, even in these circumstances. The Malorian looked surprised but extended its arm. As Hannah examined the cut, Jiho positioned himself beside her, his back to the nearest camera. "The Vacasians are deliberately creating an incident," she whispered, while applying pressure to the wound. Her hands moved efficiently, giving her a reason to stay close to Jiho. "I know," he replied quietly. "The officer who checks the night rotation has been communicating with someone outside station protocols. I saw him using a separate communication device during the midnight check." Hannah finished treating the Malorian, who bowed deeply in thanks. As they moved away, Hannah asked, "Do you think Earth knows where we are?" "Yes," Jiho confirmed, "but there's more happening here than a simple detention. We need to understand the full picture before we act." Across the common area, their children had been allowed to play a simple Vacasian strategy game with a young guard. The guard, who had introduced himself as Officer Talin, seemed different from the others, younger, less rigid, and clearly uncomfortable with guarding children. Jiho watched as Sue laughed at something Talin said. The guard's face showed surprise, then pleasure. Jiho moved closer to listen. "Is it true that human children go to special buildings just to learn?" Talin was asking. "All together with many teachers?" "Yes, we call them schools," Tay explained. I'm in 4th grade now. We learn math and science and history. Talon seemed fascinated. Our educational programs teach that humans train their young for combat from an early age. Sue giggled. No, we play games and read books. Dad helps me with science experiments sometimes. Jiho noticed how Talon absorbed this information clearly, comparing it with what he had been taught. The children were unwittingly performing perfect cultural diplomacy. Later that afternoon, as they were being escorted back to their cell, Jiho noticed Officer Talon speaking quietly with another guard, one he hadn't seen before. The new guard had insignia marking him as a higher rank, and he was clearly angry. We were told to keep them isolated, the senior guard hissed. They're just a family, Talon protested. The children need time outside the cell. Orders are orders. The senior guard snapped before walking away. Jiho filed this information away. The normal detention protocols were being overridden by someone, but who and why? As evening approached, the lights in their cell flickered, once, twice, then steadied. Jiho straightened up immediately. What is it? Hana asked, noticing his sudden alertness. The power fluctuation is worse than yesterday, he explained, and it's happening outside the regular cycle. Just then the lights flickered again, more dramatically this time. A low hum built up in the walls around them. That's not right, Jiho said, his voice now urgent. That's a sign of a failing power core. He had seen similar symptoms on starships before emergencies. Is it dangerous? Hana asked, already moving to gather the children. Before Jiho could answer, a loud alarm began to sound throughout the detention block. The sound was piercing, designed to cut through any language barrier with its message of danger. Everyone. Against the back wall, Jiho instructed his family. Now. The lights went out completely, plunging the cell into darkness. In the hallway outside, they could hear shouts and running footsteps. Their cell door slid open halfway and stuck there, the emergency systems attempting to release prisoners but failing due to power loss. Jiho moved to the door and peered out into the chaos of the darkened hallway. Emergency lights cast an eerie red glow over everything. He could see other detainees confused and frightened, some trying to escape, others huddling in corners. Something's very wrong, Jiho said, turning back to his family. This isn't a drill or a test. The station is in real danger. Red emergency lights cast long shadows across the detention block as alarms blared. Panicked shouts in a dozen alien languages filled the air. Jiho stepped through the half-open cell door and assessed the situation quickly. Dad, what's happening? Tay asked, his voice barely audible over the noise. Jiho sniffed the air. The life support systems are failing. He recognized the sharp chemical smell that shouldn't be present in properly filtered station air. With the power fluctuations affecting the atmospheric regulators, toxic gases were beginning to leak into the detention area. Different species from various cells were running in confusion. A tall insect-like trisalien was gasping, its breathing tubes fluttering frantically. Nearby, a group of small, furry Bontari were huddled together, their sensitive eyes wide with fear. We need to act fast, Jiho told his family. He climbed onto a bench and raised his voice. Everyone, listen to me. Few paid attention at first. Jiho put his fingers to his mouth and whistled sharply. The piercing sound cut through the chaos, and faces turned toward him. Everyone remain calm, form groups by atmospheric needs, Jiho called out. Oxygen breathers to the right wall, methane breathers to the left, chlorine processors to the far corner. His commanding presence and clear instructions began to bring order to the chaos. Detainees started moving into groups as directed. Hana, we need to create separate air zones, Jiho said, jumping down from the bench. The atmospheric mixing is what's causing the toxic reaction. Hana nodded, understanding immediately. I'll need help identifying who needs what. Tay, Sue, help. The others get organized, Jiho instructed his children. Remember your xenobiology lessons. Look for physical traits that indicate breathing types. The children nodded and began guiding confused aliens to their proper groups. Tay remembered the charts his mother had shown him. Creatures with certain gill structures needed higher nitrogen content, while those with multiple small breathing holes required different mixtures. Jiho moved quickly to a wall panel and pried it open with strength that surprised the watching aliens. Inside were the basic components of the station's ventilation system. I need tools, he called out, Anything metal or rigid. Several detainees offered what they had, eating utensils, pieces of their bunks, even parts of their own clothing or accessories. Jiho worked rapidly, disconnecting pipes and rerouting airflow. "What are you doing?" asked a Malorian who had been helped by Hana earlier. "Creating separate ventilation zones," Jiho explained as he worked. "The station has emergency protocols that shut down contaminated sections. By isolating our air supplies, we can trigger those protocols for each area separately." On the other side of the room, Hana had organized a triage area. She examined different species, quickly determining which ones were suffering the most from the air contamination. "The Forians need more oxygen," she called to Jiho, "and the Glicks are showing signs of respiratory distress." Jiho nodded, almost ready with the first section. He finished redirecting a ventilation pipe to create a sealed air zone for oxygen. Breathers. Cool, clean air began flowing into the area. The relief on the faces of those who could breathe again was immediate. Working tirelessly, Jiho moved to create a second zone for methane breathers, using panels from the cells to construct makeshift walls. His military training had included emergency life support systems, but never for so many different species at once. Sue was helping an elderly Trizalian to the oxygen zone when she noticed a Vakazian guard stumble through the doorway. His blue skin had turned a sickly gray, and he was gasping for breath. "Mom, a guard needs help," Sue called out. Hana rushed over and examined the Vakazian quickly. "He's been exposed to chlorine gas. His system can't process it." Without hesitation, Sue ran to where her mother had been working. She grabbed a small container Hana had prepared from medical supplies, an oxygen supplement created for emergencies. The young girl returned to the guard's side and with gentle hands placed the breathing device over his face. "Breathe slowly," she instructed, remembering her mother's lessons. The guard's eyes focused on the human child helping him. Confusion crossed his face, followed by gratitude as his breathing eased. Through the chaos, Officer Talon had entered the detention area with a team of emergency responders. They froze at the sight before them. A human man rebuilding the ventilation system, a human woman treating injured aliens, and 2 human children guiding frightened detainees to safety. "What's happening here?" demanded the senior officer who had accompanied Talon. "The humans," Talon said, pointing to Jiho and his family. "They're saving everyone." The senior officer watched as Jiho finished the 3rd air zone, bringing the emergency under control before the station's own response team could even begin to act. "These aren't the actions of smugglers," Talon told his commander firmly. "These are the actions of heroes." In the station's security center, Director Krell watched the scene unfold on the monitors. The detention block's cameras had remained operational despite the power failure, capturing everything. "Send this footage to the Vakazian High Council," Krell ordered his aide, "and to Earth's ambassador." He watched as Jiho Park, wrongfully detained and given every reason to be angry, instead worked tirelessly to save everyone in the detention block, including his Vakazian captors. "I want Commander Park and his family brought to my office immediately upon resolution of this emergency," Krell said. "This situation has gone on far too long." In the detention block, Jiho wiped sweat from his brow as he made final adjustments to the air filtration system. The emergency response team was now working alongside him, following his lead. "Dad," Tay said, approaching his father with pride in his eyes, "I think they know who you are now." Jiho smiled at his son. "It's not about who I am," he replied. "It's about what we do when others need help." The grand chamber of the Vakazian High Council gleamed with polished blue stone. Light from 3 different suns filtered through tall crystal windows, casting rainbow patterns across the floor. Jiho Park stood tall in his formal Space Fleet uniform, the silver and black fabric highlighting his military bearing. Beside him, Hana wore a simple but elegant Earth diplomatic dress. Their children, Tay and Sue, were dressed in their best, clothes looking both nervous and excited. 5 Vakazian elders sat on raised seats before them. Their blue scales shimmered in the light, and their ceremonial robes featured intricate patterns that showed their high rank. The center elder, Counselor, Vraz was the oldest. His scales faded to a pale blue-gray with age. "Commander Park, Dr. Park, and young citizens Tay and Sue," Counselor Vraz began. using the formal address for children that Ji-ho had taught the council to use. "We have gathered today to offer our deepest apologies for the treatment you received on Nexus 9 station." The room was filled with observers, Vakazian officials, Earth diplomats, and representatives from other Alliance species. In the back, Officer Talin stood at attention, watching the proceedings with interest. "We recognize this incident was engineered by those who fear humanity's growing influence," the Council Elder continued. "A faction within our security forces, led by Commander Zrek, deliberately targeted your family to create tension between our worlds. Those responsible have been removed from service." Ji-ho nodded. "Sometimes fear is simply unfamiliarity. Earth has experienced similar growing pains in our own history." His voice was calm and measured, showing no anger despite what his family had endured. Councillor Vraz's inner eyelids flickered in surprise at Ji-ho's gracious response. "Your understanding honors us, Commander. The Vakazian people wish to make Haemsons. We offer you and your family diplomatic status for the remainder of your stay in our territory. And," added a younger council member, "we have established a cultural exchange program in your honor to ensure that such misunderstandings become less likely in the future." Station Director Krell stepped forward. "Commander Park, the actions of you and your family during the life support failure saved 23 lives, including 7 Vakazian citizens. Our medical team confirms that without your quick thinking, there would have been significant casualties." Sue looked up at her father with pride shining in her eyes. Tay stood a little straighter, trying to copy his father's dignified posture. "We acted as any humans would," Ji-ho said simply. "Perhaps," Councillor Vraz replied, "but your actions have shown us qualities in humans that many of our people did not understand before." The formal ceremony concluded with the presentation of ceremonial gifts, beautiful crystal sculptures that changed color with the touch of a hand. As the family prepared to leave the chamber, Director Krell approached them privately. "Commander Park, I have assigned Officer Talin to serve as your cultural liaison for the remainder of your stay," Krell said. "He requested this position personally." Ji-ho looked across the room at the young officer who had shown kindness to his children during their detention. "We would welcome his company." 3 days later, the Park family's vacation continued as originally planned. They visited the famous crystal gardens of Nexus 9, where plants from 100 worlds grew together in carefully maintained environments. Officer Talin accompanied them, explaining the significance of various Vakazian plants and asking endless questions about Earth. "Is it true that you have water that falls from your sky?" Talin asked Sue, as they walked through a garden of bioluminescent flowers. "Yes, we call it rain," Sue explained. "Rain." "Sue, sometimes it's soft like a mist and sometimes it comes down hard and makes puddles you can jump in." "Amazing," Talin said, his eyes wide. "Our world has underground water reservoirs, but nothing falls from the sky except light particles." Hana smiled as she watched the cultural exchange happening naturally between her children and the young Vakazian. This was diplomacy at its most basic and effective level, simple curiosity and friendship. On their final day at the station, Ji-ho received an official communication from Earth Fleet Command. He read it on his personal device as the family packed their belongings. "What is it?" Hana asked, noticing his thoughtful expression. "The Alliance Council has approved a new set of protocols for interspecies incidents," Ji-ho explained. "They're calling them the Park Principles." "What does that mean?" Tay asked, looking up from folding his clothes. Ji-ho sat down beside his son. "It means that what happened to us has helped create new rules that will protect other families in the future. The first principle states that families must be kept together during any investigation, and children must be provided with appropriate care." "Because of us?" Sue asked, her eyes wide. "Because of us," Ji-ho confirmed with a smile. As their transport ship pulled away from Nexus 9 station, the family gathered at a viewport similar to the one where their journey had begun. The swirling colors of space surrounded them once more, but now the view seemed different somehow, more familiar, less alien. "Not bad for a vacation," Hana smiled, slipping her hand into Ji-ho's as they watched the station grow smaller behind them. "Next time, perhaps somewhere less exciting," Ji-ho suggested with a raised eyebrow. "No way," Tay exclaimed. "This was the best trip ever. We helped make history. Jiho laughed and ruffled his son's hair. Beyond the viewport, stars stretched out in endless patterns, beckoning them homeward. But Jiho knew that home had somehow expanded during their journey. Through crisis and resolution, they had helped forge stronger bonds between worlds. Not a bad accomplishment for what was supposed to be a simple family vacation. In the ship's small communication room, Officer Talon was already making plans to visit Earth as part of the new cultural exchange program. And across the Alliance, diplomats were studying the Park Principles, learning how one family's courage and compassion had changed interspecies relations forever.